In this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast, Leif Thulin is back, and we are doing a 2022 NBA Draft Redraft. Yesterday, we did the lottery, and today we are doing picks 15 through 30. But before we get started, I want Leif to double down on his Jaylin Williams take because you, the listener, not necessarily everyone, but there are a few listeners that were pretty concerned about his reasoning for having Jaylin Williams at number 8. So we'll get Leif to explain that further. Stay tuned. Big shout out to each and every person that's made the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. I am your host, Rafael Barlowe, the director of scouting for NBA Big Board and the founder of NBA Draft Junkies, also the director of scouting for the NTX Combine, which is a combine for draft-eligible seniors taking place in Dallas, Texas, May 2nd through 4th. And my co-host for today is the man that you all know him very well. I've mentioned it on other podcasts, and I'll tell him right here while he's on here that I think Leif Thulin is going to be a star in this industry. And he has a few people that are upset with him because he had Jalen Williams going number 8 in a redraft. So if you missed yesterday's episode, you have to check it out. We did the lottery of the 2022 redraft and the Jalen Williams take. It was kind of controversial in a sense. A lot of people think you were too low on him, too low on Keegan Murray. And again, just explain your thought process why Jalen Williams is number 8.
Yeah, so when I look at the draft, and this is not only for redraft, but just the draft in general, I think about at the top specifically, who can change my franchise in the most positive direction. And typically that's a guy who can be your top option. That's Paolo Banchero in this past draft. And that's why I have a guy like Jaden Ivey over a few guys that maybe have better counting stats or have higher claims to first team all rookie. So to address the question about Jalen Williams, the guy that I think most people are probably disappointed in seeing ahead or surprised to see ahead of him was Shaedon Sharpe. Shaedon Sharpe, to me, has a higher ceiling than Jalen Williams, despite Jalen Williams starting off tremendously, and I really am high on him. This is no knock on Jalen Williams. I just think that Shaedon Sharpe has a chance to be a serious star, and I don't think Jalen Williams will ever be a star. I think he'll be a guy who stars in his role. Shaedon Sharpe has a chance to be a star. As for Keegan Murray, he was 12 in my redraft. Some of the guys ahead of him, I think, will have larger roles on winning teams eventually in their career. Right now, Keegan Murray's both benefited and hurt by being a contributor on a winning team immediately. But I think he's pretty much a guy that, not to say he's not going to improve, because I believe he will, but I think his improvements are less dramatic in a positive direction than some of the guys that I picked ahead of him.
And I'm just guessing here. I assume when you do your redraft based off of 1 year, you're thinking more so along the lines of a marathon. While yes. I think some listeners, they're doing a redraft specifically just based off of this particular season that just passed. But you're doing it based off of the info from this season and how you see them long term. And I think that's fair. Yeah, I mean, I thought Jalen Williams was very good. I haven't thought about where I would put him in a redraft, but I'm not a betting man, even though, that's some of our sponsors sometimes. But I will say that I think that Shaedon Sharpe has a very, very high upside, and that's why I was asking you yesterday, where do you think Sharpe would go if he were in the 2023 class, or even if he played a season of college basketball? I mean, he contributed. He was good at the end of the season. Even though he did go to a team that is a bad team, that wasn't their plan at the beginning of the season. And they were still trying to hold out hope late into the season, or, past the trade deadline, that they were going to be a playoff team. And then they finally decided, okay, we're not going anywhere all year. Well, not all year long, but after the trade, after the trade deadline, I couldn't believe that they played Cam Reddish over Shaedon Sharpe. That to me, that just didn't make sense to me, unless they thought Cam was going to help them win right away. But in my opinion, long term, Shaedon Sharpe is a much more, I don't know, I guess a valuable piece to what the Blazers are doing than Cam Reddish. So I thought he should have been playing right after All-Star break. He should have been playing 30 minutes per game, in my opinion.
Yeah, you got to cultivate and grow the players that can really change your franchise down the road. And I agree with you there. I think one more point about Shaedon Sharpe versus Jalen Williams. Jalen Williams has a guy in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander that is the guy, and he's got another guy who handles the ball quite frequently in Josh Giddey. And I think that lowers his upside as opposed to Shaedon Sharpe. When he's in his prime of his career, I believe he'll be one of the two best players on his team and will have the ball in his hands. And I think that's a more valuable skill set than that of Jalen Williams, where he'll be a supplementary guy who stars in his role.
Valid. All right, let's get into this part 2 of the redraft. Who do you have at number 15?
I've got AJ Griffin.
Has he even played in the playoffs?
Not much, if at all. And I think part of that is this is not a particularly friendly matchup for rookies playing against the Boston Celtics, who are tough, rugged guys 1 through 5. AJ Griffin, though, a lot of his concern and the reason he dropped into the actual draft was because of injury. He, to me, was and still is the best shooter in this class. He is a guy that athletically isn't phenomenal, but he looks like he's improved since the Duke kind of re-aggravation of an injury from high school. And I think there's a role for him on many teams. And in the Hawks, you have Trae Young creating and you spot up, and I think that's a nice match. But I think on a lot of teams, size and shooting is a hot commodity. And I think he has the shooting in spades. The size isn't amazing, but it is amazing. It's good for his position. And I think anyone taking 15 with a chance to be a 45% shooter, I'm not 3-point shooter. I'm not saying that's what he is right now, but I think throughout his career, there's going to be a few years where he's upper echelon of the shooters in the NBA.
Yeah, and I saw something. I can't say I watched a lot of Hawks this year, but I saw a Hawks fan say they need more shooting. They just did not have enough shooting this year in floor spacers. And you would think that Griffin would have a bigger role, because even in the playoffs, yeah, I mean, it's going to be tough. You get matched up against Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. But if he's giving them like floor spacing, I think it kind of makes everyone around him a little bit better. All right, who is number 16 on your list?
I'm torn between two guys that went to big-time basketball schools and were seniors when they came out, and it's between Andrew Nembhard and Ochai Agbaji. I would say Nembhard had the better rookie year, but I think Agbaji's path forward may be more clear. I think he started off in a weird spot where the Jazz were trying to win, and they had guys ahead of him like Malik Beasley, like Jordan Clarkson, who Beasley was traded and Clarkson was injured. And when he was in, he was rushing. He didn't shoot well and shot about like 28% for the first month and a half of the year from 3, and didn't look particularly great, even in G League games. And then all of a sudden, the last 2 months of the season, he took a bigger role defensively, looked the part, and shot the ball very well, and finished the season with a 28-point game. So I watched him up close. I think the role forward for him is more clear than it is for Nembhard as to how he can be a starter on a winning team, because I think the Jazz next year are planning on penciling him in as a 5th starter or maybe a 6th man. As for Nembhard, I almost called him Ryan Nembhard, but it's Andrew Nembhard. He is a very heady player that reminds me a little bit of Tyus Jones, and I think he's a phenomenal addition to any team. But I don't think if you're drafting, you're going to take the guy who's a kind of a table-setting point guard as opposed to a guy who could be a 3-and-D wing. So I lean Ochai Agbaji, despite Nembhard having been the better rookie thus far.
So you have Nembhard at 17?
Yes.
And I think there's value. I think if Nembhard ends up being Tyus Jones in a redraft 10 years down the line, that is more than likely, that is lottery production. Tyus Jones is
And
going to be
it's
in the NBA a long time. He had 8 assists and like 1 turnover tonight.
Yeah, and I think Tyus Jones is better than Nembhard will be, but that's not a knock on Nembhard. I think Tyus Jones is phenomenal. Just a point of thought that you just mentioned, if like you go further away from when these drafts happen, I think teams are getting better at taking picks. But I was going through the past 10 drafts, but when I was before making this list, and just kind of gaining knowledge of, hey, like where are the mistakes made? Where are the most common like hit rates for once you're lower in the draft? Like what positions hit the most frequently? And I went through a lot of these top 10s, and they'd go like 3 of 10 of starters or very good players. And even in what I'd consider good drafts, because there's a lot of really good players that are picked like 15 to 30, the lottery was very hit or miss. So the fact that you've got a guy here who was picked 32nd or 31st in Andrew Nembhard, like within consideration in 1 year, that's really impressive. And the further along we get into this, ranking my this year, I feel like a lot of these guys that we're optimistic about, we may have more clear evidence of not being very good in a few years. But I think there's going to be more good players in this year's draft than there has been as of 5-10 years ago, because I think the front offenses are getting better.
Yeah, I mean, there's still a lot of guys that are getting drafted high because the team is swinging for the fences with a very limited sample size. I mean, we saw 2 guys that were drafted in the first round, late first round, but drafted in the first round last year that weren't very productive. And then you're starting to see, I won't mention the name, but you're starting to see like some guys that weren't productive this year that are getting mentioned as being in top 30. But I have a number for you. So Andrew Nembhard as a rookie averaged 9 points, 4.5 assists on 44% shooting from the floor. Tyus Jones as a rookie, 4 points, 3 points year 2, 5 points year 3, 7 points year 4, 7 points year 5. You can make a case that Andrew Nembhard has been, I mean, was way better as a rookie.
He was a 4th year coming out of college as opposed to a freshman, is the one thing I'll put to dispute that.
Okay. And that's valid. That makes a lot of sense. That makes a whole lot of sense. But yeah, Tyus Jones this year had his first year where he averaged over 10 points per game. But he's still pretty young. He's still, I mean, was it 5 straight years where he has led the NBA in assist to turnover ratio?
Yeah, I think 5 of the last 6. Maybe Monte Morris might have gotten one.
And those guys, like these table setters, these game managers, really have value. They have a lot of value. So, all right, who is number 18 on your list?
Number 18 for me is Jaylin Williams from Arkansas. He contributed to winning early on in his career, playing the center at the NBA level, which people had concern, and I think that's why he slipped in the draft. I had him as the very end of my first round, maybe the first or second pick of my second round, which is where about he went. And I myself was a big fan of him, but I didn't know if he'd be able to shoot well enough to play a stretch 5, which was his appeal at the NBA level, as opposed to like a facilitator that he was at Arkansas. And he really shot well this year, improved rapidly, still was taking charges at an unbelievable level. It's almost appalling that once he's on the floor that people still don't jump stop next to him, because he takes a charge every single time. And he started in the play-in. Like that's as much as you can ask for a pick that late. And I think he's going to have a fruitful career. I think his role will diminish because Chet Holmgren will come in. And so I feel as if that's he's not going to plateau as a player. I just think his value, according to the rest of the class, plateaus.
That makes sense. And I think he's going to be good. I think that it's probably a bad comparison, but the role that Xavier Tillman is playing for Memphis, I can see him playing a similar role. And maybe it's just a recency bias in a sense, because Xavier Tillman just had a really good game in the playoffs. But I could see a similar top 7, 8 rotation guy that can come in and impact games when he's in.
I agree with that. I think Tillman's a guy that was older when he came in, and
Much older.
Was kind of he was physical and intelligent, and then he's kind of parlayed those skills into a really nice role And I think that type of player is going to become more and more popular as size and not ability to step out and shoot, which is obviously coveted, but size and just like versatility on the interior becomes more and more important.
Xavier Tillman has two things about him that is shocking to me. One, he's only 24 years old, and two, he's only 6'7". I thought he was bigger than 6'7".
I thought he was taller than that too.
Yeah, they haven't listed at 6'7". Could be wrong, but this is what they have listed at. All right, if you're looking to build a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It is the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay's guaranteed fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know if the part will fit, or you will get your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game. And when you shop on eBay Motors, and with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it is easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. Eligible items apply. Exclusions apply also. Big shout out to each and every person that has made the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. Every dayers. Tomorrow on the show, we have special guest. I'll just say it's a special guest. All right. We left off at number 18. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Who was number 18 on your board? On your redraft?
Let's see. I think it's 19. 18 was Jaylin Williams. Malachi Branham is my number 19. He's the guy that I kind of had penciled in around this range, but I was a little skeptical of. I loved the production of Ohio State. I didn't know how his game would translate to the NBA.
And
I was pleasantly surprised for. Yeah, he's a mid-range shooter, and I think the Spurs was a nice landing spot for him to take those shots. I think there's some teams that would disincentivize that and change his game, which was part of my skepticism. But I was pleasantly surprised, and I think he's a guy that has carved out a niche a la TJ Warren, kind of. Someone who can create their own shot and isn't a tremendous defender, has not unbelievable athleticism, but the guile and that allows them to find their shots and contribute to winning on a. And you guys are going to hear me say that phrase, contribute to winning. And that's how I draft it. It's like, who can I value as a piece that I want to build for my championship contender? And so I think there's roles for him to succeed in that avenue.
All right. Number 20.
I'm going to go with Dyson Daniels. And I think given time, he's a guy I think could rise. I think he was in an interesting situation in New Orleans where they were really hot to start the year, had some injuries, and needed different things from him. But one thing is clear, he can defend at this level. The shot is improved, but it's not quite there yet. And I think that he's a guy that he could be a top 7 rotation player for a winning basketball team and pride himself defensively and develop more into a scorer. I'm not saying this is his comparison for me, but I could envision playing similarly to a guy like Derek White.
I just can't unsee the games early in the G League season last year where he had to bring the ball up the court with his back turned.
Yeah.
And that's a guy that his best position on offense to me is as a ball handler. And then, like you mentioned yesterday, the G League is still a work in progress as far as evaluating. And Daniels was like 29 spots ahead of Jaden Hardy, something like that.
I got a lot of flack on Twitter last year. I had Jaden Hardy number 10. I had Dyson Daniels 15 or 16, and no one liked me for that one. And maybe I'm biased towards Jaden Hardy. Sure, I probably am, but I have him 13 this redraft. Daniels 20. I think Daniels' situation is super important for him to succeed, whereas I think a guy like Hardy can score the ball wherever he's placed. You could put him on planet Mars, and he'd be able to get a bucket.
Yeah, and I just thought from the beginning, I think we did an episode early in the year, that I just didn't see a path for him to get playing time this year. He got a little bit more due to, the Pelicans had a bunch of injuries, but even next year, I imagine the most of their roster is back, from CJ to Brandon Ingram to Herb Jones. Where does he play? Do you see him getting a lot of minutes next year? Trey Murphy.
Not without injury.
Yeah, so we're talking about a guy that went 8th, and we don't know if he's going to be able to be in their top 7 rotation. All right, number 21.
Number 21 for me is Marjon Beauchamp. I know he didn't play a lot. The Bucks are the best team in the league, at least the regular season. I think they're the favorites heading into the postseason. But in the flashes that I did see, I was impressed by his versatility. He's got the defensive chops and more to his offensive game than I perceived entering the draft. And so he's someone that I kind of have my long-term stock in. I think there's always room on a winning team, a team that has title aspirations, for a guy that is defensively oriented but has offensive tricks to his game. And I think he's a willing off-ball contributor, someone who slashes to get his buckets, shoots open ones, and doesn't need the ball in his hands to make an impact.
All right, next one, 22.
22, I'm taking Christian Braun from Kansas. Or Christian Brown.
Brown.
I was reading again. I was about to say Braun, but I got it right the first time. He is similar to Beauchamp, where I feel like his athleticism is his main trait, and he's got a good motor. Knocks down open shots, rebounds the ball, defends valiantly, and is an unselfish player. So there's room for those type of players on many rosters, and I think he has impressed far as a rookie. And I think I was too low on him. I overthought what his good traits were at Kansas, and thought, you know what, how can those apply to the NBA? And it was pretty much a straightforward application, just on a lower scale.
Yeah, I was concerned about his lower release, but in limited time this year, I think he's been fine. All right, when we return, there's one player who seems to be sliding, and I wonder where he's going to land. Stay tuned. Last segment, and we left off at number 22. Still have 7 picks left. All right, who's number 23?
Number 23 for me is David Roddy. Ironically enough, the exact spot he was taken. He was someone, when he was taken 23rd, I was pretty shocked. Actually, very shocked. That may have been the most shocking pick of the draft for me. The appeal for him is he's playing playoff minutes and actual valuable ones immediately, but similar to like what I spoke about with Keegan Murray, I think his role really plateaus quickly. And this success that he's having early on, I wonder if like Grant Williams is the archetype for this role, where you're a defensively oriented big body that has the capacity to shoot threes. And both Roddy and Grant Williams were far more than that when they were in college. And I wonder if if I was taking this as a tabula rasa, a blank slate, would I take a guy like David Roddy over a guy like Marjon Beauchamp? Because the Grizzlies like these type of body types. They play a style that's conducive to that type of player. So I wonder if he's as valuable on different teams. But I will acknowledge that if it were based off 1 year, he'd be higher. I just don't think his potential's as high.
Hey, he's playing. And I mean, I live in Dallas, watched several Mavs and Grizzlies game, and there was one game where he literally won the game for Memphis, and it was a much needed win for the Mavs. And I think that loss was one of the losses that made Dallas think like, okay, maybe we need to shift gears here. And he's playing, and he could end up. I mean, this series is tied 1-1, headed to LA, but he could end up having a big role. I think that he's going to have a bigger role long-term for Memphis than Zaire Williams, who they took at number 10 the year before. And I remember doing a redraft episode with Chad Ford last year, and I didn't have Zaire Williams in my top 10, and people were on my head about that. But I've never been a Zaire Williams guy. Never. I was amazed that he went 10 despite having like a very, very unproductive season. And his freshman year at Stanford, everybody gave me the reasons why: COVID, knee injuries, yada, yada, yada. But he looks like he's somebody that is going to be way outside of Memphis's rotation in the very near future. All
Yeah,
right.
as a Stanford fan, that one pains me, but I agree with your assessment.
Number 24.
Number 24 for me is Bryce McGowan's, someone that had limited opportunity, but I kind of buy his style as being successful in some fashions. I think he could be a bench scorer for a long time. So if he really hits, he could start. He has the scoring capacity. His shot wasn't beautiful at Nebraska last year. He got to the free throw line at an insane rate, and
Yep.
that's something I typically value when I look at people's scoring ability. I'm not sure that it'll be for a few years. Like I don't know if I were doing this for a 5-year span that he'd be here, but I think in a 10-year span, if he's able to carve out a nice spot where his skill set is prioritized and made a the way I want to put it is made into a situation where he can play like himself and not have to fit into a mold that is like 3-and-D for a guy who's wired to have the ball and score. I think he could really thrive, and so I'll buy the potential there.
Do you think Charlotte is higher on him than James Bouknight right now?
Yes.
Interesting. And Bouknight he's lottery pick, right? 11th pick, 12th pick.
11th, I think.
Oh man, that's a crazy situation. 25. There's a guy that I know you will really, really like. I'm surprised he hasn't been mentioned yet. And maybe he is at 25.
I think I know who you're talking about here. I just didn't see it from the season, so I'm pretty sure I know who. But I'm going to go with someone I did not like entering the year. I'm going to go with Peyton Watson here.
Okay.
Peyton Watson, towards the end of the year, showed really good athletic defensive flashes as the secondary rim protector. I saw him play live in Salt Lake, and he had 3 blocks and was extremely active. Shooting the ball wasn't his strong suit, but he plays on a team that really has a generational passer, Nikola Jokic, and he can cut off the ball if he gets it a little bit better as a player holistically and plays with Jokic. I think he's got a chance to really thrive in that situation, kind of in the way that Aaron Gordon does, cutting off the ball. Doesn't need to shoot very well, just needs to defend and play his role. And I think there's few players like Jokic, obviously, but there's a lot of roles for athletic long wings that can be secondary rim protectors. So I think he's a candidate to improve his position in a redraft in the coming years.
Well, he already has. He got him up 5 spots. So He already done that. All right, number 26.
Number 26 is who I believe that you were referencing, and that's Blake Wesley.
Yep.
I loved Blake Wesley coming out. I think that he was going to have a rough transition rookie year, and I'm optimistic for the second one. And I think I will have him higher in even yet next year. I believe that he can get anywhere on a basketball court he wants. He just did not shoot the ball well from any level.
Yep.
And I saw a stat that he was like the 3rd worst shooter in the NBA at like true shooting percentage of like all the shots he took. He just really struggled. But I think that he's going to adapt, and because he can get where he wants on the court, that it's just a matter of time for shot making. And I think his facilitation, based on the way that he could score, I think there's a way for him to be a solid point guard in the way that Jaden Ivey already has become. I'm not saying they're the same player, but they follow the same style where I could see him succeeding as a second unit guy, and I could see him starting if given the opportunity. But Trey Jones is really making it tough on him there because he's like his older brother, a phenomenal table setting backup point guard.
Blake shot 38% from 3. Wasn't on a heavy volume of attempts, but he was solid from 3. It's just getting to the rim. He only took 52 threes in 37 games, but he was 20 of 52. So I thought that was pretty encouraging. I'm rooting for Blake. I met Blake, had a chance to talk to him after a game this year. Just a great, great guy. I think he needs to get stronger. And once he gets stronger, I think he's going to be a much, much better finisher at the rim. And I'm looking forward to watching him grow over the years. And then I'll probably spend some time in Vegas watching him work out at Impact. So definitely rooting for Blake. All right, number 27.
Yeah, I still got my Blake Wesley stock, though. I didn't sell it. Number 27, Ousmane Dieng. He's someone that I could see going higher in redraft soon. The Thunder have a young core, but they prioritize guys that were winning now, and it made it hard to really have an assessment for Dieng. Talented, long, can do a lot of things in terms of like what he can do, but he also has shortcomings, and those shortcomings were more prevalent in what I've seen, and I'll base it mostly off what I've seen in order to buy flashes or not buy them. And so I think he's tentatively placed here, but I don't have a strong read at the tail end of this full first round.
Yeah, Oklahoma City has so many young guys, a ton of draft capital. There's no way they're going to keep all of those guys. I think there is a chance that may not happen this year, but maybe next year or next summer, that they consolidate some of their young guys and some of their picks to bring in an all-star level player. It's almost like they should really consider it now, since they only have one big contract, which is Shea's under the book. So, would you make that move if there's like a disgruntled star, maybe not necessarily on the level of Dame Lillard, but if there is someone that can come in and contribute right away, do you consolidate some of their young players like a Dieng and future picks, or do you just continue to grow with the guys that they already have?
I think it depends the player and where they'd fit in. Like the name that popped in my head as you're going was Jaylen Brown. I'm not saying he's disgruntled, but he's one of those kind of borderline superstars, but I'd consider him a star that has a chance to move teams in the coming off seasons. So if Jaylen Brown's available and you send Dieng some future picks, I'd strongly consider it. I just don't know if the Celtics would do that. And obviously, this is an imperfect comparison, but I would. It just depends if they fit the way that the team wants to play, regardless of if they go get a star, because they have such a strong foundation already with their youthful pieces.
Would you, this is off subject, would you consider bringing Trae Young to Oklahoma City, his hometown?
Probably not. I think Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's better, and Josh Giddey's good with the ball in his hands. So you take the ball out of two players' hands that are already proven to be successful. And I think that you'd have to pay a load to get him. And I like where their franchise is heading anyway.
Yeah, I have a friend, and I've mentioned it before. I don't know if it was on the podcast with you or Richard, but he had he backed it up, and I saw the information. Actually, he told me this back in 2018. He said that he would take Gilgeous-Alexander over Trae Young back in 18. Mm-hmm. And then when I mentioned it to him a few weeks back, he was like, yeah, I probably would have got fired. I just needed enough security to get me to the point where he passed him up. But he was like, now, if I would have kept my job over those years, because I might have got fired when Trae went to the conference finals in what year, 2 or 3 or whatever. But he's like, now I would look like a genius. And so, I saw the report that Atlanta is possibly open to moving everybody, Trae Young included. And I think one of the first places you're going to hear about as a potential destination, even though it doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense, is Oklahoma, because he's from Norman, which is like right outside Oklahoma City. All right, 28.
28, I'm going to go with Patrick Baldwin Jr.
Guy that I was not high on at all. I was probably like his biggest hater last year.
I had Patrick Baldwin Jr. I don't know this for certain, but I think I had him at 28 in mine. Because I think that shooting is and Golden State's certainly a good landing spot for him. Shooting and size is pretty rare at the level that he has the touch to do so, the capacity to do so. And he didn't play a lot, but there are a few flashes that I saw. He had a good game against the Jazz that I was working, so I that one stuck in my head. I've watched the Warriors a couple more times because my cousins are all from the Bay, so I'm in basically a Warriors group chat that I don't really partake in, but I listen to, and so I hear about his flashes, and I think that despite being an underwhelming athlete, I think he can compensate for that by shooting, and there's always room for shooting on playoff teams. I'm not saying he's going to be a strong contributor to these teams, but you're not necessarily banking on that at 28.
Yeah, 38% from three. I mean, that's the only positive. Was a much better shooter in the NBA than he was in college, where he only shot like 26% from three. All right, number 29.
I'm going to go with Christian Koloko from the Toronto Raptors. Went to Arizona. I saw him a lot in college. In the NBA, I think the role for him is clear. He can play drop coverage. He can switch. He's a defensively oriented big who showed flashes of shooting ability. He just hasn't gotten the opportunity to prove it yet. But that's someone I can buy stock in. And the fact that I saw him make such enormous strides at Arizona to where he was draftable in the first round, he was picked just outside of it, makes me believe that he can have a similar jump early in his NBA career.
All right, who is the last guy, number 30? As of right now, I believe you have 5 guys that were selected in the second round that have moved up to your first round. So who is the last pick?
He would fit that billing. I don't feel confident in this pick, but I'll go with Caleb Houston of Orlando. Similar logic to Baldwin. I just believe shooting and size, and also for him, youth. He's not a particularly old guy. He reclassified to when he went to Michigan, so he's still young in the NBA, can shoot the ball pretty well. I saw him play earlier in the season, and I saw him a lot in summer league, and I was impressed with the stroke. And I thought defensively, though he's not a phenomenal athlete, he competed, and that's a culture that in Orlando that I think is getting better, and I think his strengths will be prioritized sooner rather than later.
All right, so that's 6 guys. So I'm trying to think. The 6 guys in the first round that were left off: Johnny Davis, Jake LaRavia, Wendell Moore, Nikola Jovic, Ty Washington, and I guess I'm missing one. Or is that it? Oh, a guy that you were high on last year at this time, an Arizona guy, didn't make your top 30.
Oh, Dalen Terry. Yep.
Yeah. I thought from the beginning he was in a bad situation, and
they were so redundant. All their guards have the same billing, can't shoot, aren't true point guards, and are defensively oriented. And I think he had guys ahead of him that were good at the things he was good at, so it made it hard for him to succeed. But we'll see.
And that was without Lonzo Ball. But he did play. I had a chance to watch him live. He did play in that game where the Mavericks and the Bulls were trying to lose. He got significant minutes there. Well, that wraps up this episode. You have heard Leif's top 30 over 2 days. Thank you for making the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. This is Rafael with Leif Thulin, and we are out.